Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, welcome to part 6 of a multi-part series on business process modeling notation. We've also included business process execution language, BPEL, people for people. So over the past few sessions, we've talked about everything from BPMN1 to BPMN2. In our last session, we showed some examples of BPMN2. And in this session, we're going to be talking about BPMN2 choreography. In the last session, I explained the difference between orchestration and choreography. So choreography specifies a protocol for peer-to-peer interactions when using BPMN, BPEL, and there's some other workflow technologies that are out there. Some of them are black box proprietary and others are open source. So we want to understand what choreography versus orchestration means, but more importantly, we want to understand what a choreography diagram and toolbox is and how to use this. So a choreography diagram in BPMN2 provides a high-level visualization of interactions and collaborations, I must point out, between multiple participants in a business process, right? So this emphasizes the flow of message and collaboration between participants. We're going to get into participants in a moment, offering a holistic view of how they work together to achieve common objectives. Before we dive down into a real choreography diagram, I want to go back to the last session where I showed you this BPMN2 core diagram here as an example. High level, as I'd stated, the no gateways. This is just, we are conceptualizing with the client stakeholders. In the beginning of any architecture, solution architecture, enterprise architecture engagement, you're just trying to get the what needs to be done, what needs to be accomplished. And then the enterprise or the solution architect comes in and they start to find out who's going to do the what. And then at some point we get into design, that is how the what is going to be accomplished, as well as will or the contract in how the what's going to be done. It will be done this way. Everyone will agree on it and you proceed. At this point, we're just on the what and the who exercise. So this is not a valid BPMN2 diagram. How can I tell? In Sparx, in the diagram, if you right click on this and you can select validate diagram and it has system output. Let me bring this over here and I can't make it any larger, but I'll try to zoom in. You can see that the return error on the system output is the availability, this element right here, it cannot be owned by qual in this model, and as well as the qual response. This cannot be owned by the fiber qual activity, task, event. This is a service task. You can tell by the gears here, all right? So this is not a valid model. So let's go ahead and close this. Let's try to find a valid, using the same elements, a valid diagram. And I've already done it for time's sake. This is a valid representation of the two pools, participants, and the tasks or activities that we're trying to elicit or talk about in this conversation. So let's right click in here, validate diagram. And in this case, there's no errors. There's no warnings. Everything is fine in this one. All right. So this is a valid diagram at this level, but it's still ambiguous. It's too ambiguous to actually get us to design. So how I would do this, and what I do usually in the beginning of any exercise, is I use a choreography diagram. This is the same model, the same nouns and verbs, the same who does the what conversation using choreography. So now we're going to get into what a choreography diagram looks like and what each one of the elements represents. Now, when I'm doing choreography modeling, there's a particular workspace layout that I have. So I'm going to go up here. I just simply call it Properties, Notes, and Inspector. And so right now, Sparx is grabbing that template and building that out. So I like to have properties in a longer view just to the right of my work area. So when I select an element, I'm on the properties and I can do configuration. I like to have notes down here so that when I'm talking about a particular item, I'm able to scribe that down here in notes. Now, I have traceability here, so when I select an item, you can see the relevance between items. But in this particular case, I'm using Inspector. And in Inspector, there is something called, there's a trace tab up here. So it gives me pretty much the same thing that we see in traceability when I select an item. You see that? It's just that it's in the inspector trace right here, right? So when I select an element, I'm able to look at, well, customer call transitions from this start event and it transitions to this gateway event that's right here, all right? So next, let's get into the elements. So as stated before, the start events, the intermediate events, the gateways, the end events, the things that you see right here, they're the same element types that are in BPMN2 core toolbox. They have the same properties for the most part. And I'm not going to dig into those because we've already talked about those properties. But when we're talking about the choreography element, it gets very interesting. And let's dive down into the details of that next. So let's take this first element right here, choreography element. So this is a choreography element that's here. When we look at the properties, I'm going to start with the base elements, get this out of the way. So the base elements are pretty much the same in any element within Sparx. You have your documentation, your memo type data field, your auditing, monitoring, category value. What's maybe different is correlation keys. Now, something I haven't talked about, these triple dots, when you select them, what Sparx does is it filters out. So it's looking for a class type and it's looking for a stereotype where it's saying correlation key. And if you happen to have one, it will find it, it will use it. Right here, we have a correlation key example. You can select that one or whatever one there, and it brings the properties into the element. But in this case, I don't want to do this. This is a more advanced subject, and I'm just going to set it back to none. So leave it at none if you're not sure or you haven't learned how these types, right over here in BPMN2, these types. I'll try to get a session where I dive down into the meaning of each one of these, but play around yourself, just drag and drop them into a type namespace or folder, and then apply them to your testing or learning choreography elements, right? So enough of that. Each time you select one of these, like this one here is add choreography reference, you can select it, and it tells you what it's looking for as choreographies, right? And if you had a huge library and you wanted to draw relevance to another choreography event, you could refer to that event, right? It may be treating it like a superclass where you have subclasses that are inheriting the features, attributes, etc. of a superclass choreography element, and you want to use it as a reference. But again, I don't want this video to get that long. We'll try to cover these in a more advanced session. Okay, so base element out of the way, choreography element, loop type name, you've got a few to choose from. I would leave it at none. The standard loop type just continues as long as the condition evaluation is true. This one is kind of important when we're getting into long running processes, but again, another advanced subject try to get into later, right? Then you have multi-instance, parallel, sequential multi-instance, and then you start getting into loop cardinality. Don't keep it simple. Just go with none for this exercise, all right? And then choreography type, it's task, right? It's not a sub-process, just like any other activity. Is it a task or a sub-process? Watch what happens when we change this to sub-process. Gets a plus sign, just like anything else. Hey, the task here within this choreography is a sub-process. I'm going to change it back to task. And there we go, right? Again, I'm going to skip over these triple dots, drilling down into other references, etc. Is called choreography. This is true or false. Leave it at false if you're not sure, right? I'll try to define these more in another session. What I'm trying to do is get to participants. So in this particular case, your participants are part of the choreography element. Remember when we were looking at the other type of modeling, your participants were exposed as pools or lanes. They're incorporated here. Tells you that there's two participants and that the initiating participant is whatever participant A is. Then what you do is you can come down here and you can, for participant A, give it a name. There's participant A right there, customer. They initiate it. So they're initiating this choreography event, and you notice that they're not dark gray, right? They're exposed right here. Then the participant B is the manufacturer, right? And I'm going to skip over all these other references, these Boolean responses. I'll try to define these later on, right? So you can go, well, there are three participants. So let's change this to 3 and see what that looks like. You can see that now I have 3 participants. The initiating is customer, but I have 2 other participants that are working on this notion of order request. And you can go 4. As soon as you select 3, it opens up, well, who's participant C? Who's the third participant in this interaction, this choreography element, right? So I'm going to change this back to 2. And there's a drop down right here, 2. You have up to 4 choices, right? Now it's 2. And what else do we want to define here? So there's no participant C or D, so there's nothing here to define. Activity is not active. Project, your typical Sparx elements, date and time, GUID, that kind of thing, right? So that's what is powerful about a single element. It's like including the pools or participants within the task event for you to lay out the flow of your choreography diagram. All right, so there you go. All right, before we get into this choreography diagram, I want to show you how I start a choreography diagram, and it is very similar to how I start a use case. So try to put the link to that use case video within our model here. So I don't want to get into scenarios yet. What I want to do is drag notes out here to the center, expand a little bit. So if you recall the template that I used to create a use case, you have a name of the use case, you have a context, scope, level, summary, user goal, subfunction. You have your actor. Now in BPMN2, these are your participants. Then you have stakeholders and interests. These would be your pools or your lanes as well. So this would be a pool. This may be pools and lanes, right? This could be a lane, right? But we've already covered all of that. You have your preconditions, minimum triggers, main success scenarios, those kind of things. So I tend to approach building a choreography diagram, and let me remove this now from the model, in a very similar way that I do for use cases. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring back notes. So start, design, notes, right here, thank you very much. And I want to bring it, I'm just going to set it off to the side here. These are the notes for this diagram. So here's your actors, your participants, all right? Here's your context. Here's your basic flow. Here's your alternate flows, right? Your minimum guarantee that anything that this choreography diagram should or must have an end event. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. Now let me drag and drop this over here, put it back where I like to have it, move it over here to the left. And so we've got that off to the side here. All right. So I'm going to roll it up to the top, participants. So when we're looking at our participants, you can see we've got customer, manufacturer, supplier, and bidder. So we've got customer, manufacturer, supplier, and bidder. And then in each one of these activities, these choreography elements, we have two participants. In this case, customer and manufacturer. So who is the who's the initiating participant here? Who is it? The customer. How do we know that? Well, number one, it's a clear in the element. The element is background yellow, so it's clear. And then the second participant, who's not the initiating participant, is in a grayish color background. All right. So when we go to this element, who's the initiating participant? Manufacturer, right? And who is participant? The non-initiating participant, the customer. I want to make sure it's clear. So when we're looking at this one, participant A is customer. Participant B is manufacturer. Who's initiating the choreography event, the activity? Well, it's B. So it is the manufacturer, right? And then the activity, and again, you can go into base, define your elements right here, your base element properties. But you can see here, this choreography type is a task. It's not a sub-process. It's a task, all right? And that's all you need to do. There's a lot more as far as, if I double click into this, of course, defining what it is, just along with setting the properties, and then adding in any external tags that you may have to further define the activity. But what we're going to do is keep it as simple as possible here and just step through this. So we've already done starting events, intermediate events, gateways. So as we're going through this, what's the story that we're telling? Let's do that next. So just in case I'm going too fast, this is the default Sparx workspace, right? So browsers on the left, properties in the upper right, notes. And that's pretty much how everyone looks. I've shown you all how to configure your own workspace layouts. This is my common layout. I like toolbox over on the left. I like browser up in the upper right with pan and zoom and inspector. And then I like in the lower right, I like to have notes, properties, traceability, features. I do script automation and system out, right? So this is my common layout. The layout that I told you I was going to use is a layout I created, properties, notes, and inspector. In this layout, it's very similar to my common, but what it does is it pulls property out, puts it to the right of the work area, my diagram area here, so that it gives me the ability to look at the full set of properties when I'm navigating my work area, my diagram, right? I like to have inspector on. So inspector has details, trace, summary, and status, right? So I like it on the trace tab. So when I select an item, I'm able to look at relevance between, that's the relationship between other elements, right? And that's the same thing as I stated earlier as turning on traceability here, right? So I don't talk about the inspector quite a bit, but in this case, we're utilizing it. And then I like to have notes because when this is a start event. Well, what is that? What's a start event? Is it coming from somewhere? And I'm just stating it. This is customer engages manufacturer to order part or parts. As simple as that when I'm sitting down with a client. And just like any other Sparx element, you can open up the properties, you can go to responsibilities, you can start developing requirements at the element level. You can start setting constraints and rules at the element level. And you've all seen this quite a bit. You can start building scenarios at the element level. And you've all learned, well, from scenarios, once I build them, I'm able to auto-generate sequence diagram, activity diagrams, and other diagrams, all right? So I'm not going to say any more about that. So we can see at this particular case, looking at the inspector, that the start transitions to order request. Nothing else. I mean, it would literally show, is this connected to any other choreography diagram? Is this start event used in any other BPMN2 diagram? That would all show in the inspector, right? And especially in traceability, right? So when we look at customer, we can see that, oh, this is a task type. It has two participants where participant A is initiating the process, the order request activity. And the other participant is the manufacturer, right? So very quickly, you can start to look at the actors within your model flow, the participants, and start modeling from them. So this happens to be an order request. So the manufacturer can provide an order request from their website or their store. It could be human retail agent, face-to-face with the customer. The customer at that point initiates the order event, and they submit it to the supplier and or distribution center. The order is posted through the order gateway right here. So it's posted through the order gateway. And we're telling our story here for reporting, other analytics, and for approaching delivery. We go into each one of the flows. We can put as much intelligence here. We're just stating that order is submitted through the manufacturer's event gateway. This is an event gateway, right? And I have the properties here. I like it to be unspecified, right? Doesn't change anything. At some point, it may change to diverging, and I explained what diverging meant a moment ago. So you have one input, and at this event gateway, it could have multiple outputs, right? And those multiple outputs could be sequential, parallel. You could define a lot more. Leave it at unspecified. Keep it simple. And here I explained that the manufacturer's event gateway handles order processing. That's the whole role and responsibility. So in this case, it's creating a new instance of an order, a process or order object, right? And then we are passing the order through the handling of the order request within the receiving platform capabilities, right? So whoever's receiving that could be down here with the manufacturer to check that, hey, are parts available? And if they're not, we need to go do something. Or, yeah, the parts are available. We're absolutely sure of it. Run it to yes, provide order confirmation, and then deliver the order to the customer, and then flow it through to the end event, right? So I'm going to use pan and zoom so I can move around as I'm talking about this model, and it's not an eye chart for you, right? So from the order gateway, if we go back to the inspector we have trace on, you can say that the order gateway comes from the order request. It transitions from the order request, and it transitions to either order confirmation, order rejection, or some sort of procurement of parts, procure the parts, right? Now let's go through the happy path that, hey, yeah, we got the product. It's going to go right up here to order confirmation, right? So we see here who's the initiating participant? Manufacturer. There's two participants. Again, A is the customer, B is manufacturing. We're just stating that, well, participant B is initiating this test right here for order confirmation, right? And we'll get to the link here, the catch intermediate event. We'll get to that in a moment, right? So then what would happen here is that it transitions from either A or, it came the gateway, order gateway, and it transitions to confirmation order, deliver order, sorry about that, and then boom, it ends. It's not that it ends, you're just getting into the delivery of the order. You need to validate the customer actually received the order and do a lot of other things before you do a lot of other things, right? But this is very simple. choreography diagram showing multiple business process events happening within a single and simple to follow diagram, right? So let's go down the less happy path, right? The one that we're not sure of. Can the order be fulfilled? Well, we're going to look at capacity. It could be, thousands of orders for the same part coming in at the same time. And that, we're going to make sure that we have the pipeline, the inventory in our supply chain to be able to fulfill the order. So in this particular case, we're checking with the supplier, procure the parts if necessary. Who's the primary? It's the initiator, it's the manufacturer. Are all parts available? Yes. In this case, we're using a link event here, intermediate event, to A, right? So this is a throw, the dark, it's output, and it's throwing where? To A. So I'll go to here, A. This is a catch, throw and catch. And code developers know what I'm talking about here. So here's a catch, A, into the order. So we're stating here, after this order gateway, are the parts available? Yes, cool. Order confirmation, deliver the product, right? Are the parts available? No, right? Now, we've seen this on or online ordering sites, like Amazon. You pick an item and it says currently in stock, right? So currently in stock, you go there, boom. They're confident it's currently in stock. Now, it might be one left. And you're predicting, well, we sell one every hour, every minute, every second, whatever. It may be calculating, we need to make sure we have some in the pipeline, right? So it'll flow down here. In this case, no orders have been placed yet by whoever the supplier is. And so there's a bidder is like a buyer. So the buyer hopefully is let known in advance, hey, we better increase our inventory or at least increase our pipeline so that we're able to meet our supply chain needs, right? So in this case, it triggers this choreography element where you have two participants, the manufacturer and the bidder, and who's the initiating participant? The manufacturer, right? So the bidder's sitting here going, okay, I am going to order the parts. Now, part auctions, this is buying, right? So you're buying on the spot market. We're not talking about coffee beans here. We're talking about parts, refrigerator parts, car parts, whatever parts, right? So you may go to other suppliers. If supplier A doesn't have it, you're going to go to supplier B, and you're going to make sure the supplier B can meet the same costs as supplier A, and you might get into a bidding war with them. I'm not sure, but I just call them bidder, right? Are parts obtained? If the answer is no, the order, I hate to use the word rejection, but we can't fulfill the order. So it leads to canceled. Of course, there's notification, customer support, all sorts of happy experiences. If the answer is yes, we throw to A, hey, we can get the parts. So we go back over here. We catch at A, order confirmation, order delivered, and customer is happy, gets the order. All right? All right, we're coming up to the end of 30 minutes. I don't want to go much further than this. So there's some other material I want to cover. We'll cover it in the next episode, and that's dealing with simulation. We're also going to, in that episode, we're going to drill down into these elements and start to get into structured editors, scenario building, and building other models and so on. So we'll step through how simulation works in choreography diagrams. It doesn't work as well as it does in, class diagrams, behavioral component diagrams, state diagrams, but there's still a lot you can do as far as developing requirements. But when I'm working with client stakeholders, we're able to develop requirements, get an understanding of how the systems and the components are going to work, and develop more requirements. So in the next episode, we're going to go through some very simple models, some very simple simulations. One of the questions was around signals. I'll explain signals, how they apply in that episode, and as much as I can, where simulation works, how it works, and where it doesn't work. All right. So I look forward to seeing you in that episode. And until then, happy modeling.